awful lot of forgotten little towns in this country, and Braddock, Pennsylvania is definitely one of them. It's only 11 miles outside Pittsburgh, but Braddock is basically empty at this point. Only 1,700 people live there. That's down from a population of more than 18,000 during the Second World War. Braddock is now so underpopulated that you can buy a 4-bedroom home there with a 2-car garage right in the middle of town for $3,000.
That doesn't make sense.
Don't believe it? Check it out yourself on Realtor.com. So, you know the story. For decades, the biggest employer in Braddock was manufacturing, something called the Edgar Thomson Steelworks. In fact, Andrew Carnegie built it there, along with his first stone public library, which still stands. So for generations, Braddock, Pennsylvania was a real place, and then, inevitably, the steel plant closed, and the usual disasters arrived: unemployment, hopelessness, drugs. People left by the thousands. But one man saw an opportunity in Braddock, Pennsylvania. Not an opportunity for the town, but an opportunity for himself. That man's name was John Fetterman. Fetterman was 35 years old and had never in his life had a real job. Fetterman was not from Braddock, hardly. He grew up in an affluent neighborhood 4 hours away. Fetterman had spent his adult life going to school, first to business school, then to Harvard for a so-called Masters of Public Policy, which for the uninitiated is an utterly meaningless document that you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get in order to tell people that you went to Harvard.
And it's not easy for me to say that.
But in Fetterman's case, it wasn't expensive at all. It was free. His dad paid for it and paid for everything else. As the Philadelphia Inquirer put it, for a long stretch lasting well into his 40s, deep into middle age, Fetterman's main source of income came from his parents. They gave him and his family $54,000 in 2015 alone. In other words, John Fetterman was a classic trustafarian, a flaky middle-aged man looking for a purpose in life. And in Braddock, Pennsylvania, he found one. In 2005, a year after arriving in Braddock, Fetterman announced he was running for mayor. And amazingly, boldly, given that he was a professional student living off his rich family, John Fetterman decided to run as a blue-collar populist. But the media asked no questions. They loved it. In John Fetterman, the media saw themselves. He was just like them.
Well spoken, sir.
So Fetterman narrowly won the race, and then the campaign to boost John Fetterman's career began in earnest. The Guardian newspaper described John Fetterman as the coolest mayor in the country. The New York Times told its readers, who didn't know any better, that John Fetterman had, quote, turned the busted town of Braddock, PA, into a national symbol of hope, hard work, and authentic blue jeans. Wow, how inspiring. Fetterman thought it was. He went on a national tour to brag about how he was single-handedly saving this benighted mill town in western Pennsylvania. He gave a TED Talk, of course he did, about how he was running Braddock using the lessons that he learned at Harvard. In 2011, he went, of course he did, to the Aspen Ideas Festival to further brag. Here's what he said, quote, "We created the first art gallery in the four-town region with artist studios. We did public art installations. And I don't know if you consider it art exactly, but I consider growing organic vegetables in the shadow of a steel mill an art. And that has attracted homesteading." It's so perfect.
I'm a huge tool.
Homesteading, organic vegetables, art installations. And also, again, inevitably, a heaping dose of climate theology, all imported from Harvard. So Fetterman imposed on a town with no jobs carbon caps on Braddock, Pennsylvania. And he claimed these carbon caps would somehow, he never explained how, bring more manufacturing jobs back. He called this initiative Carbon Caps Equals Hard Hats. So expensive, unreliable energy will mean more manufacturing jobs. And yet somehow no one laughed at him. So John Fetterman kept going. In a 2009 advertisement for himself, he promised that, quote, with a smart, economically viable carbon cap policy in place, communities like Braddock can begin to build its manufacturing and middle class back up. This whole notion that we can continue to operate as we have been and ignore climate change is ludicrous. They loved it at the Aspen Institute.
Oh, really?
And to be fair, John Fetterman did not ignore climate change. He talked about climate change endlessly. He made climate change the centerpiece of his administration in Braddock, Pennsylvania. As for actually running the town or improving the town of Braddock, he was not interested, not even a little bit interested, and that's provable. As mayor, according to public records obtained by the Washington Free Beacon, Fetterman missed more than a third of the borough's monthly meetings. He was off at the Aspen Institute. In his entire tenure as the mayor of Braddock, John Fetterman cast just a single vote at a city council meeting, and it was a meaningless one. It was a procedural vote for borough president. So what happened next? This is always our favorite part of the story. What were the results? How did Braddock, Pennsylvania fare under the leadership of John Fetterman? That's really the only question that matters. And again, we want to be as fair and objective as we can be. So we're going to tell you that under his tenure as mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, the seas did not rise. That is true. Braddock is still on dry land. Of course, it's very far from the ocean, but it's still dry.
You disgust me. How can you live with yourself?
So his climate policy worked. He can be proud of that. Unfortunately, everything else fell apart in Braddock. People kept fleeing. Braddock's population is currently at its lowest level ever recorded. The median income in Braddock, Pennsylvania is $14,000 a year. More than a third of households in Braddock live below the poverty line. Braddock, by the way, has one of the highest crime rates in the state of Pennsylvania. In 2018, shortly after Fetterman left office, Braddock's per capita murder rate was higher than it is in some of the most dangerous countries in the world. Honduras and Belize are safer than Braddock, Pennsylvania. So that's a failure. And in a functioning system, a record like this would have disqualified John Fetterman from ever running for anything again. He failed demonstrably as a leader. It had a higher murder rate than Honduras and the lowest population ever recorded.
What the hell is going on?
Sorry, climate change didn't improve the town. So in a fair system, a system that cared about achievement, a meritocratic system, John Fetterman would be leaving politics on the express train and moving on to something like interpretive dance. Try that. Maybe get his dad to pay for ski lessons and move to Aspen or something. But we don't have a functioning meritocracy, much less a functioning political system. We have a very broken one. So John Fetterman set his sights even higher. Having wrecked Braddock, he became lieutenant governor, and now he plans to run for the United States Senate. What's he going to do if he gets there? Well, his idea is to make the entire state of Pennsylvania and the entire country much more like Braddock, with much higher crime rates. And we're not making that up. Here he is, John Fetterman, in 2020 as lieutenant governor, fantasizing about giving amnesty to thousands of violent criminals, including murderers.
Don't change the subject.
If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and fix one thing, what would it be?
Life without parole in Pennsylvania. We could save billions in revenue long term. We could save thousands of lives and not make anyone less safe. And also expunge as many permanent records of people that have been living their best lives and have been paying well beyond when they should have for a charge that they caught, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
So in huge parts of Pennsylvania, which is a big state, a real state filled with really nice people, and it was an economic powerhouse for more than 100 years, in huge parts of that state, there are no jobs. There is poverty, there is hopelessness, and there are huge numbers of drug ODs. That state's been devastated by opioids, by fentanyl. But John Fetterman, if he had one wish, if he could make one change to the state of Pennsylvania, he'd let the murderers out. Right. That's who he cares about. So in Pennsylvania, typically, if you commit murder, you get life in prison, as you should. You're not allowed to kill people. But Fetterman would change that. He'd like you out of jail as quickly as possible. Talk about a rich kid concern, by the way. No actual populist or actual working class person talks like this, worries about punishing murderers too much. Maybe if you achieved the first 115 things on your to-do list, you'd worry about, are the murderers serving too much time in prison? That'd be after you got people jobs, after you convinced their children to stay in the state where they were born, after you fixed the fact that thousands are dying of drug ODs. Only rich kids think like that. And by the way, only rich kids wear hoodies to political events. Oh, I'm a working man, I'm wearing a hoodie. No working man actually wears a hoodie to a political event. Oh, your stupid little fake tattoos. It's a costume, of course. Duh, it's not real.
Good job.
Yeah.
Take pride in that.